please.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Tavapi tarhi kauravya saptaham jivitavadihi upakalpaya tat swarvam tavad yat samparayitikam.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Tvapya itarhi kauravya saptaham jivatavadihi upakalpaya tat sarvam tavadiyat samparayakam. Hare Krishna.
Tavapetarhi kauravya saptaham jivitavadihi upakalpaya tatsarvam tavadyat samparayikam.
Hare Krishna. Tavape tarhi kauravya saptaham jivitavadihi upakalpaya sarvam tavadyat samparayikam.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, let's see. Word for word translation. Tava, your. Api, also. Etarhi, therefore. Kauravya, O one born in the family of Kuru. Saptaham, 7 days. Jivata, duration of life. Avadhi, up to the limit of. Upakalpaya, get them performed. Tat, those. Sarvam, all. Tavat, so long. Yat, which are. Samparayikam, rituals for the next life. Translation. Maharaj Parikshit, now your duration of life is limited to 7 more days. So during this time, you can perform all those rituals which are needed for the best purpose of your next life. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Shukadev Goswami, after citing the example of Maharaj Katvanga, who prepared himself for the next life within a very short time, encouraged Maharaj Parikshit by saying that since he still had 7 days at his disposal, he could easily take advantage of the time to prepare himself for the next life. Indirectly, the Goswami told Maharaj Parikshit that he should take shelter of the sound representation of the Lord for the 7 days still remaining in the duration of his life, and thus get himself liberated. In other words, everyone can best prepare himself for the next life simply by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam as it was recited by Shukadev Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit. The rituals are not formal, but there are also some favorable conditions which are required to be carried out as instructed hereafter. Tadapyetarhi kauravya saptaham jivatavadi upakalpaya tatsarvam tavadyat samparayikam. Maharaj Parikshit, now your duration of life is limited to 7 more days. So during this time, you can perform all those rituals which are needed for the best purpose of your next life. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine. Hare Krishna, thank you everybody for coming. Another beautiful and important verse in a great section of the Bhagavatam, the second canto, in general is really amazing. We get to hear from Shukadeva Goswami for the first time, and the actual conversation between Shukadeva and Parikshit is starting, and so much is covered going through it, the pastimes of Krishna, and especially we learn a lot about the title of this chapter is The Creation. So we learn about the creation, and we hear about because it's about the creation, we hear about the enlightenment of Lord Brahma, his preaching, and then his being preached to by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the 4 very important Chatushloki verses. So a lot of great stuff, amazing stuff in this canto, and it's starting off with a bang, with a very interesting discussion. He says the first words of this verse are tava api. Tava means you or your, and api means indeed or even or especially. So why is he saying that? Especially or even you. He's saying to Shukadeva is saying to Maharaj Parikshit, even you or especially you. So what does that mean? You indeed, because he just finished telling the story of Maharaj Khatvanga. We all know it. I don't need to review the whole story, but here's the previous verse. The saintly king Khatvanga, after being informed that the duration of his life would be only a moment more, at once freed himself from all material activities and took shelter of the supreme safety, the personality of Godhead. So I like that, the supreme safety. So he tells the history of Maharaj Khatvanga, and then he says, Tavapi, you too. Not just Maharaj Khatvanga could do it, but you too. You're in a similar situation. You have a limited lifespan. So he's saying Tavapi. And Tavapye Tarhi. Etarhi means at the present time. So that happened, Maharaj Khatvanga, long, long ago, however long ago, yugas or years or centuries, however long ago it was. And now you're in this situation. And Maharaj Khatvanga, again, looking at yesterday's verse, where is it? Muhurtat sarvam utsrijya. He was able to perfect himself muhurtam, within a moment. So a muhurta, we know muhurta is Brahma muhurta. And technically a muhurta is a period of time equal to 48 minutes. So 48 minutes means there's 30 muhurtas in a day. We know Brahma muhurta, if you take the exact time of the sunrise, count back 48 minutes, and that time is the end of the Brahma Muhurta, and 48 minutes before that is the beginning of Brahma Muhurta. So within just a Muhurta means 48 minutes. It also means not technically a moment. Just like if you're saying just in a brief span of time, speaking more generally. Just like we say to someone, oh, I'll see you in a minute. It doesn't mean I'll see you necessarily in 60 seconds, but it means I'm going to see you in a little while. So similarly, he had just a muhurta, just a moment, just a short span of time, whether it was some undefined short span of time or 48 minutes, but within that time, he understood, oh, I only have this short period of time. What do I need any benediction from the demigods? I'm going to immediately go home, engage myself in Krishna consciousness, and end my life in that way. And Tavapye Tarhi means you, Maharaj Parikshit, now should do the same thing. So this is the preparation for death, the realization of death. Khatvanga had a moment, a muhurta. Parikshit Maharaj had Saptaham Jivatavadi. He had 7 days. So if a muhurta is 48 minutes and Maharaj Parikshit had 7 days, that means he had 210 times as much time as Maharaj Khatvanga had. So therefore, Shukadeva is saying, Tavapye tarhi, you too, you do this. Like Prabhupada says in the purport. Shukadev encouraged Maharaj Parikshit by saying that since he still had 7 days at his disposal, he could easily take advantage of this time to prepare himself for the next life. So 7 days is much longer than just a moment. So you have time. Krishna's given you time given these 7 days. So take advantage. Here's Srimad Bhagavatam. And that intensity, that willingness and intensity to hear Srimad Bhagavatam with rapt attention, that comes when you understand that your time is limited. So therefore, so many times Prabhupada would say things like, philosophy means to always keep death before you, and janma mrityu jara vyadhi dukkha doshanu darshanam, you always have to be aware of the sufferings of life and specifically the coming of death. And when we forget that, when we ignore that, or when we deny that, then that's foolishness. Srila Prabhupada said, don't think that this will not happen to you. I've heard 2 different times when he said that. One time was Prabhupada was visiting, maybe it was Jagannath Puri, and they were walking on the beach by the ocean, and Prabhupada said, yes, when I was a young man, I came here and I came to this beach, and I was a young man, and I was, jumping and swimming and splashing in the waves. Now I'm an old man, and I can't do any of that. And he said to the devotees, and Prabhupada Vishnu was remembering it, and he said, Prabhupada said, don't think this will not happen to you. So don't think that you won't grow old. And the other incident is that it's remembered by some devotees that Prabhupada said the same thing near the very end of his time in this world in Vrindavan, when he was incapacitated and weak and sick and approaching the end of his stay. And he said the same thing, don't think that this will not happen to you. So this awareness of death is intelligence and seriousness and impetus for our devotional service. And if we don't want that, if we're interested in material life, if we're interested in sense gratification, then we have to forget all about that. Just like in Mahabharata, famous story, in the Yaksha Prashna, the questions by the Yaksha to Maharaj Yudhishthira. And one of the questions to Yudhishthira was, Kim Ascharyam? What is amazing? That's a very broad question. You could think of so many amazing things. But he said, Kim Ascharyam, what is amazing? And Yudhishthira responded, Ahanyahani Bhutani, Gachantiha Yamalayam. Ahanyahani Bhutani. Ahani means day. So Ahanyahani, day after day after day, every day, day after day after day after day, Bhutani, all the living beings in this world, Gachantiha Yamalayam. Their ultimate destination that they attain is going to the place of Yamaraj. Or in other words, we see all the living entities in this world day after day are dying. And every day in the news, some celebrity has died, some old movie star, some old rock and roller, some old politician has died every day. And even within ISKCON, we're hearing Prabhupada disciples and old devotees are getting older. Such and such Prabhu has passed away. Such and such Prabhu has passed away. So what's the most amazing thing? Ahanyahani Bhutani Gachantiha Yamalayam. We see day after day, everyone is dying. But Shesha Stavaram Ichanti. Shesha means, but those who are left behind, means us, those people who haven't yet died. What are they thinking? Stavaram Ichanti. They're thinking, oh, I want to make within this material world a very nice permanent place. They're seeing everyone is dying, but I want to make a permanent place within this material world. Ichanti means I desire. Stavaram means fixed or firm or permanent. So Shesha, those who remain, are thinking, let me make a permanent place within this world. Kimas charyama takparam. What could be more wonderful than this? Yudhishthira said. So this is the most wonderful, not wonderful in meaning great, but wonderful that, it's amazing. It makes you full of wonder that how are people so bewildered? It's wonderful. Prabhupada, sometimes he said, this is the eighth wonder of the world, that everyone's dying and we see it and we know it, but we think, oh, I'll stay in this material world and enjoy. So this is what Shukadev Goswami is reminding Parikshit Maharaj not to do. Khatvanga had a moment. You have 7 days, but you know the time is coming. So you have to prepare. You take to hearing Srimad Bhagavatam very seriously. Again, going to the purport. That since he had 7 days at his disposal, he could easily take advantage of the time to prepare himself for the next life. Indirectly, the Goswami told Maharaj Parikshit that he should take shelter of the sound representation of the Lord for the 7 days still remaining in the duration of his life, and thus get himself liberated. So this is the intelligent person, the spiritualist, the philosopher, who wants something beyond this material world, has to be aware of this. Death is coming. Sometimes it's said, I think I've shared this before, that I heard one devotee explaining that Maharaj Parikshit was cursed to die within 7 days. And we are also cursed to die within 7 days, in the sense we're going to die either on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Within those 7 days, we're going to die. And of course, we don't know how much time we have left, but we can also assume, those of us who are in fairly good health, that we'll probably be here next week and next month and next year, God willing, and maybe longer. Especially those of you who are younger out there can expect decades ahead of you. So as Shukadev Goswami was inspiring Maharaj Parikshit, Khatvanga only had a moment. You have a full 7 days. It's so much more time. You can very easily take to this process. So we're not on the standard of Parikshit Maharaj, but we could use this same argument that, Parikshit Maharaj had 7 days. We have probably years ahead of us. So take it so serious. That doesn't mean take it less seriously. That means take it more seriously. That our time is coming. We mercifully have some time, or we may not have that time. We don't know if we even have a minute left, but we can assume that we have days and weeks and years ahead of us to absorb ourselves in Krishna consciousness, to hear Srimad Bhagavatam with rapt attention, to advance in devotional service, so that what Khatvanga Maharaj got after a moment and what Parikshit Maharaj got after 7 days, we can get after a lifetime of devotional service following Srila Prabhupada in his ISKCON movement. We can attain the same thing. And those who reject it are the most unfortunate people in the world. One example of those unfortunate people is Ajamil. It's said about Ajamil in the 6th canto, Bunjana prapiban kadan balakan sneha yanchita, that Ajamil, after he fell down and at the end of his life, he was eating, he was drinking, he was chewing his food, balakam sneha yanchita, and he was so captivated and so entrapped by affection for his family members, specifically for his son. And because of that, Bojayan Payayan, Ajamil himself was eating and drinking, and he was also feeding his little son and giving drink to his little son. Bojayan Payayan, he was feeding the son, giving the son to drink, but Mudho, but he's a fool. Why is he a fool? Na Veda Gatam Antakam. Na Veda, we know Veda means knowledge. Na Veda Gatam Antakam. He did not understand that the end was coming. Antakam, the end, means the end of his life. And Veda Gatam, Veda means knowledge, and Gata means goal, and Na means no or negation. So he was a fool. Why? because he did not know that the time of death was very fast approaching. He could not understand that. Therefore, he was the biggest fool, Ajamil. Going back to some of the words of the verse, at the end of the verse, Shukadev Goswami says, Tavad yat samparayikam. Samparayikam is an interesting word. One meaning of samparayikam is a war chariot, like Arjuna's chariot or Yudhishthira. All the Kshatriyas, they have chariots drawn by horses. And the meaning is that they use those chariots to cross over the ocean of battle, to cross over the war and the battle and come out victorious on the other side. So this is one meaning of samparayikam, a war chariot. The other meaning is samparayikam, those rituals, those ceremonies that are enacted at the time of death in order to cross over into the next life. And this is how samparayikam is usually translated. The word turns up quite a few times in the Bhagavatam, and it means the rituals at the time of death, the different ceremonies at the time of death. And in the translation, Prabhupada says, so during this time, you can perform all those rituals which are needed for the best purpose of your next life. So this is samparayikam, those rituals, those ceremonies, those activities which prepare you for samparaya, for perfectly preparing for and crossing over into the next life, to do it perfectly, not to die like an animal and take birth again, but to die perfectly in full consciousness so that you can return back home, back to Godhead. So Ajamil did not understand that, therefore he's a mudha. Parikshit Maharaj and Katvanga understood that, therefore they attained perfection. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, do we have the understanding? Do we have the will and the conviction to do that, to take to Krishna consciousness and take to hearing Srimad Bhagavatam with that degree of seriousness, with that degree of attention and love and focus to do that? And that's why one of the reasons why we read and study the passages like this, because if someone like myself who's not so serious and thinks that I can enjoy in this world, reading a verse and a purport like this is reminding me and gradually convincing me that life is not meant for enjoying in the material world, that it's meant for preparing for the time of death, so that I can ultimately return back to Godhead. This is the purpose of reading passages like this. We all of us here already know what we're supposed to do. We know we're supposed to chant our rounds, chant in kirtan, preach, worship the deity, associate with devotees, take part in Srila Prabhupada's ISKCON movement, and provide some service. We all know what we have to do. It's not like we're, in one sense, when we hear that chant Hare Krishna, we're not hearing something new. We're not learning something we haven't learned before. But we haven't fully integrated it into our life. We don't have that 100% firm conviction yet. Therefore, we need to go on hearing and go on following and practicing and reading Srimad Bhagavatam so that we can develop the determination to do those things that we already know we're supposed to do. It's for the determination, and that's why we do that. That's why we chant, or it's one of the reasons why we chant, why we associate with devotees, read Srimad Bhagavatam, visit the holy Dham, worship the deity. And of course, those are the 5 important items in devotional service that Srila Rupa Goswami stresses, that Srila Prabhupada always stresses, that Srimad Bhagavatam always stresses, that Nam Kirtan Bhagavat Shravan, Nam Kirtan Satsanga Bhagavat Shravan, Maturavas Archamurti Shraddhaya Sevan. So those 5 things, chanting, associating with devotees, visiting the holy Dham, worshiping the deity, they're all so powerful in their own right that if you have just a little bit attraction to any one of them, you could very quickly come to the stage of Bhava Bhakti. But even if you're not yet on that stage of being really sincerely attracted to them, just by engaging in them, it helps develop and create that conviction in us. So they're powerful in their own right in terms of elevating us. And they're also powerful in the way that they mold our consciousness and purify our consciousness so that we actually have the attachment to them that's necessary. This is the process that's described also in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Shraddha Shabde Vishwas Kahi Sujada Nischai. Shraddha, this faith, this conviction, that Shraddha Shabde Vishwas Kahi Sujada Nischai means a very firm, unbreakable conviction and determination that what? Krishna Bhakti Koile Sarva Karma Kritahoy. That simply by performing devotional service, everything is accomplished, everything is taken care of, everything is covered by engaging in devotional service. So this is the power of devotional service. If we're not yet pure, if we're not yet convinced, it will purify us and it will convince us. And then when we have that conviction, then very quickly we advance to the stage of perfection within this life, or at the end of this, either way, within this life become perfect, or at the end of this life, we can have that conviction to hear about Krishna, to remember Krishna, to chant Krishna's name at the time of death, and that perfection will also take us back to the spiritual world. So we have these miraculous end-of-life occurrences. Katvanga, in just a moment, he became perfect. Just a moment. He left the heavenly planets, went back to his kingdom, engaged in devotional service, and returned to the spiritual world. Parikshit Maharaj, within 7 days, just hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, at the end, the snake bite came, his body was destroyed, he returned to the spiritual world. It was glorious, so glorious. Or I mentioned Ajamil as being the example of the Mudha, but he's also the example of the miraculous power of the holy name, that he chanted Narayan at the time of his death. And because of that, the Vishnu Dutas came, preserved him from dying, and in whatever time he had left in his life, the Bhagavatam doesn't specify, but whatever time was left, he completely devoted himself to Krishna consciousness. And at the end of his life, those same Vishnu Dutas came. This time he didn't have to see the Yamadutas. The Vishnu Dutas came in their divine airplane and brought him back to the spiritual world. So this is the amazing power of devotional service, that even in a short time, even at the time of death, these miraculous things can happen. But there's also something else we have to remember about these miraculous end-of-life being saved and happenings at the end of life, is that all of these three persons also had a life of preparation behind them when the time of death came. Just like Katvanga Maharaj, we know the story that the demigods wanted to offer him some blessing, and he said, okay, you want to offer me a blessing, but before you give me a blessing, first, can you tell me how long I have to live? So they said, oh, you only have a moment left to live. So when he heard that, he said, thank you, I don't need any blessing. And he immediately engaged in devotional service. So why is that? Katvanga Maharaj says about describing his own life. This is from the 9th canto. Katvanga Maharaj says, I was never attracted, even in my childhood, by insignificant things or irreligious principles. I did not find anything more substantial than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The demigods, the directors of the three worlds, wanted to give me whatever benediction I desired. I did not want their benedictions, however, because I am interested in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who created everything in this material world. I am more interested in the Supreme Personality of Godhead than in all material benedictions. So he had this amazing end-of-life experience, but he had a whole life of devotional service behind him as well. Even from his very childhood, he was a devotee. He was never, as a child or growing up, never interested in mundane things. He never found anything more substantial, more real, more important than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, when he was offered benedictions, and when he knew he just had a moment left, therefore he was able to make that decision. Let me take the devotional service, which he had been performing his whole life, but now let me take it even more strongly, even more intensely. So this is the life. That means his whole life was a preparation for that moment of death. He was already detached from matter. He was already attached to Krishna when that moment came. Or the example I mentioned of Ajamil. This is also very interesting, I think. Ajamil started his life off actually as the first-class Brahmana, and he worshipped Narayan in his youth until circumstantially he was overcome by lusty desires. He fell in with the prostitute. He devoted his life to all sorts, living with that prostitute and all sorts of sins and crimes. He was cheating people. He was stealing from people in order to maintain his family. But he had that background of devotional service in his childhood, in his youth. And even when he was a very sinful person, he named his son Narayan. And therefore, all the time he was going, oh, Narayan, just like because describing how Ajamil was a fool. He was feeding his son. He was offering drinks to his son. So he's saying, oh, Narayan, come here and eat this. Oh, Narayan, come here and drink that. And imperceptibly, over that time, he was becoming purified by saying the name Narayan, even though he was not even aware of it. But from that impression from his early life and the impression of chanting all the time Narayan, even unknowingly, then when that time came that he chanted Narayan at the time of his death, he actually, Prabhupada goes at great length to describe this. And he quotes in the sixth canto, first canto, text 27. I won't recite the whole purport, but in that purport, he quotes many different acharyas who all say the same thing, that when he chanted Narayan at the time of his death, although he was calling his son out of material attachment, all of his previous life of being a great Brahmana and being brought up right and being a devotee and saying for some time Narayan, Narayan, Narayan before, all of that came back to him. And he called his son, but he remembered within his mind, he remembered the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan, whom he was trained to worship as a child. So all of that came back to him, that previous impression, that previous experience, that previous training enabled that deathbed conversion, that deathbed miracle to happen because of that previous experience. It didn't just drop out of the sky from nowhere randomly. So when he chanted Narayan, it actually became chanting Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Or the best example, of course, is Parikshit Maharaj, who we've been hearing about towards the end of the first canto. We heard about Maharaj Parikshit. And Prabhupada, he would always say several times, he would say that Parikshit Maharaj, his birth was amazing. The Yaksha asked Yudhishthira, what is amazing? So Prabhupada said, what's amazing? Parikshit Maharaj's birth is amazing, his life is amazing, and his death is amazing. So all of it is amazing from his very birth, not from his very birth, from before his birth. He was a great devotee. He was in the womb of Uttara, that is mother Uttara. He was in the womb, and the Brahmastra was coming, and Lord Krishna personally appeared before him to protect him from being killed, to protect him from being aborted by the Brahmastra. So even before his birth, he was a great devotee. And then after his birth, he was always looking, oh, where is that person? Krishna, who protected me in the womb, where is he? Where is he? Is he here? Is he here? Is he here? Therefore, he was given the name Parikshit. Parikshit means the inquirer or the searcher or the inquirer. So he was always inquiring, where is Krishna? Where is Krishna? So his whole life was completely devoted to Krishna. Therefore, when the time came at the end of his life, only 7 days left, therefore he was able to have this amazing detachment that, okay, the curse came, whatever, I accept it. Okay, whole kingdom, goodbye, renounce it all. And not only the renunciation, but having the determination that I want to hear from Srila Shukadeva Goswami continually for my last 7 days and attain perfection. So these three persons, their whole lives were so amazing. Therefore, at the end of their life, this miraculous transformation was able to occur. Like I said, it doesn't just drop out of the sky. So the holy name is powerful. We cannot imagine how powerful the holy name is. But if we don't prepare ourselves for that moment, then we may not be able to fully realize or fully appreciate the power of the holy name. The holy name is unlimitedly powerful. What's that? Nam Nam Akarhi Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktis. That Krishna has come in so many holy names, Krishna and Govinda and Jagannath, Sharad Bihari, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Gauranga. These are all divine names of the Lord. And Bahud Nija Sarva Shaktis. Nija means his own personal Sarva Shaktis, all of his energies, all of his potency, all of his personal energy. And his person, because it says Nija Sarva Shaktis, his personal energy means his internal energy is there present in his holy names. How and why is this possible? That the potency is present in his holy names. That's also described. Abhina Twam Nami Namino. That there is no difference between the holy name of Krishna and the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, who is being addressed, who is being named, who is being identified by that holy name. No difference. When you're chanting Hare Krishna, Prabhupada says in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna and his internal potency are dancing on your tongue, because Hare Krishna means Radha Krishna. So Radha and Krishna are dancing on your tongue when you're chanting. If you understand, if you appreciate, if you have realization. So first we hear the glories of the holy name, how powerful it is. There's that Puranic verse, I'm not sure offhand where it's from, that one recitation of the holy name can deliver a sinful man from more sins than he can even imagine committing. Not only more sins than I have committed, not only more sins that I'm capable of committing, but more than I can even imagine committing is delivered by one recitation of the holy name. So the holy name is undoubtedly unlimitedly powerful. But if we don't prepare ourselves, if we don't educate ourselves in the transcendental science, if we don't have a life of devotional service supporting us and purifying us and giving us that realization, then realizing and appreciating and being touched by that unlimited potency at the time of death will be very difficult. And if we take it cheaply, oh, whatever I do, it doesn't matter. At the time of death, I'll chant. This is a version of what's that? Namno yasya balad hi papa budhi, to commit sins on the strength of the holy name of the Lord. That's a version of that offense that, oh, I didn't practice well. I don't have realization. I don't study the Bhagavatam. I don't follow Srila Prabhupada's directions. But at the time of life, I'll chant Hare Krishna and go back to Godhead. This is committing sins, or at the least being a slack devotee on the strength of the holy name of the Lord. And this is not a very good mentality. So we understand the glories of the holy name of Krishna. We also don't think they're imaginary, because that's also an offense to not believe the potency of the holy name. But out of respect for the holy name, if we have some understanding, we have to take it so seriously that just like what Katvanga Maharaj did in a moment, after a lifetime of preparation, and what Ajamil gained in a moment after a lifetime of preparation, and what Parikshit Maharaj gained in 7 days after a lifetime of preparation. If we don't have that lifetime of preparation, it's going to be very difficult. But at the same time, we don't doubt the power of the holy name. Prabhupada says in the Nectar of Devotion, after some glorification of the holy name, where actually I think that verse is quoted about, he quotes that verse, that the sinner can be delivered from more sins than he can even imagine committing. And then Prabhupada says in the Nectar of Devotion, in these statements about devotional service, sometimes it may appear that the results have been overestimated, but actually there is no overestimation. Some devotees, as revealed scriptures give evidence, have had immediate results by such association, although that may not be possible for all. So we can't necessarily think, oh, one recitation, Hare Krishna, and I'm completely pure, and even more sins than I can imagine committing, and my business is finished. This is a misunderstanding, although sometimes, like Ajamil, he said Narayan once. There's one nice class where this verse, that one of those verses from 6th canto was being discussed, and the devotee was reading the verse, and I guess this was the first printing of Srimad Bhagavatam of the 6th canto, and the devotee was reading, and he read that Ajamil called out, Narayan, 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 and Prabhupada stopped and said, not 3 times. Does it say there 3 times? And Devotee said, yes, here it says 3 times. And Prabhupada said, correct that, not 3 times. He called out once, Narayan, just 1 time, that was sufficient, not 3 times needed. So the power of the holy name is so amazing. But if we don't prepare ourselves to understand and receive and benefit from that power, then our situation may not be as fortunate as Ajamil or Parikshit or Katvanga at the end of our life. And one more brief point that I'll finish up with. I mentioned how Shukadev Goswami says, Tava Yat Samparayikam, perform all those rituals which are needed for the best purpose of your life. And how this word Samparayikam generally refers to the rituals at the time of death. You burn the body, you have chant these mantras, you have this ritual, you do that ceremony, all these things. And Prabhupada writes in the purport, the rituals are not formal, but there are also some favorable conditions which are required to be carried out as instructed hereafter. Let me read that again. The rituals are not formal, but there are also some favorable conditions which are required to be carried out as instructed hereafter. So there are rituals at the time of death. We in ISKCON, and Prabhupada in particular, was not particularly ritualistic. A big part of the mission of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was to defeat Smartaism. Smartaism is absorbed in rituals. All they know is rituals that you do to mantras, you do to tantras, you recite this, it has to be at this time, at that time. We don't reject rules, but we're not overcome by ritualism like Smarta Brahmanas are. And Prabhupada never taught us like that, to be overly absorbed in rituals. But at the same time, one time I heard this from His Grace Ravindra Sarup Prabhu, that Prabhupada, maybe it was even the time he visited Philadelphia, he was doing a fire sacrifice. And Ravindra Sarup Prabhu inquired from Prabhupada something about how, what is the importance of these rituals? And Srila Prabhupada said, we are not unceremonious. So we have rituals, we have ceremonies, we have our processes on our different things of worship. When you're worshiping the deity, you offer the incense a certain number of times to the feet, a certain number of times to the navel, to the head, and to the whole body. And we don't reject these, we don't throw these out. But we also don't become ruled by rituals. Like Prabhupada says, the rituals are not formal. That means they're not mere formalities to be blindly followed. When Prabhupada first started deity worship in San Francisco, I think it was, where the first Jagannath deities were carved and installed. And Prabhupada did it very simple. He said, you come, you offer a candle, like these birthday candles, and you take a candle and you offer a candle to Lord Jagannath. That was the puja. Not very intricate rituals. And then after some time, the devotee said, can we do more? He said, yes, you can also take some incense. Oh, can we do more? Yes, you can also offer some flowers. And then he said, oh, is there more we can do? And Prabhupada said, oh, there's much more. But if I told you all of it, you would faint. So the rituals are unlimited, actually. And even if we endeavor to, even if we desire to, we can't follow all of them. Especially in Kali Yuga, we can't follow all of them. And just in general, we can't follow all of them perfectly. So we follow, again, the rituals are not formal, but there are also some favorable conditions which are required to be carried out as instructed hereafter. So we don't need to become smarta brahmanas, but we understand that these rituals, ceremonies, and all the rules and regulations of devotional service are meant to purify us. Prabhupada says they're not formal, but there are some favorable conditions which are required to be carried out. So all of these things as given by Prabhupada, and we don't have to unnaturally overdo the ritual side. If we accept what Prabhupada gave us as rituals, that's sufficient to purify us, and that'll help us in our devotional service. But an overabsorption in rituals will detract from our devotional service. So many, like I said, Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta fought the smartas on this, that you have to do the ritual exactly right. And so many cases of failed rituals. Who was it who was chanting a mantra to create a demon to destroy Indra? But because he chanted the mantra one syllable wrong, he said one syllable that he switched the long and the short vowel. So because of that one little mistake, tiny mistake, insignificant mistake, instead of creating a demon that would destroy Indra, he created a demon who would be destroyed by Indra. But in devotional service, we want to pronounce the Sanskrit nicely to the best of our ability. We certainly want to chant Hare Krishna with proper pronunciation. But if we mispronounce here or there, it's not going to be the end of our life or the end of our devotional service. Like it was it Twasta? Was Twasta the one who did that? It's not going to be the end of our life or the end of our devotional service if we do that, because they're not formalities, they're not mere empty rituals, but we have certain guidelines and rules to protect our devotional service. What's that? How does that shloka start, that all the rules and regulations are smartavyam satatam vishnur vismartavyu najata chit, that all of the rules and regulations can be summed up. Always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. And what's the next line? Smartavya satatam vishnur vismartavyu najatu chit etayor eva kinkara. Now I'm forgetting the second line. I can't, but Etayar Eva Kinkara, the idea is that, and all of the other rules and regulations we follow are the maidservants of those two rules. Always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. That means empty rituals don't help us remember Krishna and don't prevent us from forgetting Krishna, but intelligent use of ceremony, rules and regulations, simple, straightforward rituals that were given to us by Srila Prabhupada, those do purify us and do help us remember Krishna and not forget him. So therefore, we have to be a little intelligent how to understand the rituals, the ceremonies, the rules and regulations, not to be caught up in them for their own sake, to follow them strictly as given by Prabhupada, but to understand their purpose. This is also what's that in Upadeshamrita, that rejecting the rules and regulations are condemned, but also following them blindly is also condemned. Again, my mind is blanking out. I'm forgetting the Sanskrit for that verse from Upadeshamrita, that if you perform the rituals blindly, that's as bad as rejecting them. So therefore, Shukadeva Goswami is saying, Tavadyat Samparaikam, that you perform those rituals which are needed for the best purpose of your next life. And as Prabhupada says, they create favorable conditions which are required to be carried out. So this is the whole life of Krishna consciousness as given to us by Srila Prabhupada. He has distilled the essence of the Vedic knowledge. We know the Bhagavatam is the ripened fruit, the essence of the tree of Vedic knowledge. That's the essence. But Srila Prabhupada has also taken the essence of that essence and given it to us in the culture and the life and the processes and the existence of this ISKCON movement. We have all the rituals and ceremonies we need to remain clean and pure and cultured and well-behaved. And we have the deepest philosophy to understand why we do these things and what our goal is to do these things. And we have a process that will create in us that intense determination and that intense desire to attain Krishna. And from that, both in this life and at the time of death and in our next life, then we can actually attain Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, everybody, for your very kind attention. If there's any questions or comments now, we can discuss. Anything? Questions or comments? Just raise your hand or don't raise your hand, just speak up, since there doesn't seem to be that many people here.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, it was very wonderful.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Sorry, Kauvila Prabhu was going to speak. Sorry, Prabhuji, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, very nice class.
Thank you
And
for
very
your
nice
kind words,
example
Hare Krishna.
of Ajamil, and so it was really good, to know how much time we have.
Yes.
And think about that very seriously. That's very important for all of us.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Prabhu. Anything else?
Yes, and I really like the verse you quoted from that Chaitanya Charitamrita, Smartabhya Satatam Vishnu.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a wonderful verse.
Yeah. Very nice. Thank you, Rosie.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Question, comment, discussion? Okay. Everyone have a wonderful day. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah.
Thank you very much, everybody. Everyone have a wonderful day.
Hare Krishna.